I never thought I'd find myself in this situation. My wife Claire and I had been together for over 8 years. We had built a life together and I honestly believed we were happy. Sure, there were typical ups and downs, work stress, bills piling up, the occasional argument about whose turn it was to take out the trash, but nothing that felt insurmountable. But lately, things had started to feel off. It began with the little things. Claire became less interested in our weekend rituals, like our Saturday morning coffee runs or our bi-monthly movie nights. I noticed her texting more, often with a smile on her face. At first, I brushed it off, thinking maybe she was just chatting with a friend. But the longer the changes went on, the more my gut twisted in knots. I started to feel that familiar ache of insecurity. Last month, I decided to surprise her with a nice dinner. I booked a table at her favorite Italian restaurant, the one where we had our first date. I wanted to remind her of the bond we shared, hoping it would spark that lost flame. When I got home, I found her in the living room, dressed up but not for me. She was on her phone, laughing at whatever was on the other end of the line. I felt a sting of jealousy, but I pushed it down, chalking it up to the pressures of life. But the following weekend, things took a turn. I came home early from work one day, excited to spend time with her. As I walked through the door, I heard voices coming from our bedroom. My heart raced as I crept closer, and through the slightly ajar door, I noticed her sitting on the bed, giggling and chatting animatedly with a guy I didn't recognize. I stood frozen, battling the urge to barge in and demand answers. Instead, I quietly retreated to the living room, feeling like the ground had crumbled beneath my feet. The shock wore off quickly, and anger surged in its place. I decided I couldn't let this slide. I spent the next few days observing her, piecing together the puzzle of her sudden change. I noticed the subtle signs, her late nights at work, the occasional scent of cologne that wasn't mine lingering on her clothes, and the frequent excuses she made to go out. The final straw came when I stumbled across a text on her phone while she was in the shower. I couldn't help but peek. It felt like a crime of passion, and I was desperate for the truth. The messages were explicit enough to leave no doubt in my mind. She was cheating on me. The moment she got out of the shower, I confronted her. The tension in the room was suffocating. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest. I demanded to know who he was, and as soon as I said those words, I could see the color drain from her face. But instead of a confession, I was met with defensiveness. She quickly shifted the blame onto me, claiming it was my fault for not being present enough, for not being the husband she wanted. I felt like I was suffocating in lies. Her words were sharp, designed to cut. She insisted that the affair was a result of my neglect, that I had left her wanting more, and that I was responsible for pushing her into someone else's arms. I was shocked not only by her betrayal, but by how easily she flipped the script. I had always considered Claire to be strong, independent, and communicative, but in that moment she was anything but. For the first time, I realized that the woman I loved was not the woman sitting across from me. My heart broke all over again as I listened to her excuses, her attempts to paint me as the villain in our story. I could hardly focus on my feelings of betrayal. I was too busy processing the rage and sadness fighting for attention. I felt like I was losing both my wife and the vision of our life together. As I walked out of the house that night, I knew I had a decision to make. But I didn't want to think about it just yet. I needed to clear my head. I felt the weight of betrayal pressing down on me like a ton of bricks, and I had to figure out how I was going to move forward from here. I spent the night at a buddy's place. Derek had always been a good friend, the kind who would listen without judgment and offer solid advice. I needed that right now. The moment I walked through his door, I could feel the warmth and comfort of his home. It was a refuge from the storm that had just erupted in my life. Derek could see something was off as soon as I sat down. He offered me a beer, and I took it without hesitation. "You look like you've seen a ghost," he said, a hint of concern in his voice. I took a deep breath, preparing to unleash everything I had bottled up inside. I launched into the story, how I had noticed Claire's change in behavior, the late nights, the secretive texting, the betrayal that had shattered my world. Derek listened intently, nodding along as I recounted the confrontation. And she blamed me, man. I couldn't believe it. I mean, how could she flip it like that? Derek leaned back, taking a sip of his drink. That's classic, he said, shaking his head. People often deflect blame when they're caught. It's easier than owning up to their mistakes. His words resonated with me, but I still felt the sting of Claire's accusations boiling in my gut. It made no sense. How could she turn the tables on me? I had always been there for her through thick and thin. Yet here I was, the scapegoat for her infidelity. I spent the rest of the night talking it through with Derek. He urged me to think about what I wanted moving forward. Did I want to confront her again? Did I want to fight for our marriage, or was it time to cut my losses? By the time I left his place, I had some clarity, but I was still torn. Days passed, and the heart-wrenching reality of my situation sank deeper. I kept replaying our last conversation in my head, Claire's dismissive attitude, her insistence that I was at fault. Each memory was like a knife twisting in my heart. I felt angry and betrayed, but I also felt a profound sadness. The dreams of our future together, the plans we had made, all seemed to slip through my fingers like sand. I decided to take a few days off work. I needed space to think, to breathe. I spent my mornings jogging at the park, letting the rhythm of my feet hitting the pavement drown out the chaos in my mind. I began journaling, pouring my thoughts on paper. It was therapeutic. I could express my feelings freely without having to worry about judgment or blame. But as much as I tried to clear my head, I couldn't escape the truth. Claire had chosen someone else over me. The thought gnawed at me day and night. Wasn't I good enough? Did I really neglect her? I hadn't seen the signs clearly before, but now they were obvious. I remembered the details, the late nights, the unexplained absences, the changes in her schedule. It was as if I had been wearing blinders, oblivious to the reality lurking in the shadows. One night, while lying in bed alone, I thought of the man Claire was seeing. I felt a surge of anger. Who was he? What did he have that I did? Was he younger, funnier, more successful? The jealousy swelled, but it was intertwined with a sense of powerlessness. I had no control over Claire's choices, but I did have control over my own. That night, I made a decision. I wouldn't sit back and allow this betrayal to define me. I would confront Claire again, but this time, armed with everything I had learned about myself and our marriage. I wouldn't let her blame me for her infidelity. I needed to regain my power, to reclaim my narrative. The next day, I texted Claire, asking her to meet up. I didn't want to have this conversation in our home. It felt too personal, too loaded with memories. I suggested meeting at a coffee shop, a neutral ground where I could speak my mind without distractions. I didn't know what was coming next, but I was ready to face the truth, whatever it might be. As I prepared for our meeting, I felt a mix of anticipation and dread. There was so much to say, and I wasn't sure where to start. But one thing was clear. I was done being the villain in this story. It was time for Claire to face the reality of her actions and the impact they had on me. I arrived at the coffee shop early, a knot of anxiety twisting in my stomach. The smell of freshly brewed coffee wafted through the air, but it did little to calm my nerves. I ordered a strong black coffee and took a seat in the corner, trying to collect my thoughts. My mind raced with what I wanted to say to Claire. I needed to stand my ground this time. When she walked in, my heart sank and rose at the same time. Claire looked put together as always, her hair perfectly styled and her outfit crisp. She greeted me with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes, and I couldn't help but notice the way her expression shifted when she saw me. She looked uneased. "Hey," she said, sliding into the seat across from me. "Thanks for meeting up." I nodded, taking a sip of my coffee to buy myself a moment. "We need to talk," I said, my voice steady but laced with tension. Claire's smile faltered, and I could see the apprehension creeping into her demeanor. "Yeah, I figured that much. I'm sorry about the other night. I was just—" "Let's skip the apologies for now," I interrupted, my heart pounding. "I need you to listen, Claire. I know about the affair." Her eyes widened, and for a brief moment I could see the facade crack, but just as quickly she regained her composure. "What do you mean?" "That's not— Don't even try to deny it," I said, cutting her off. "Again, I saw the messages on your phone. I've seen the changes in your behavior. You can't just blame this on me anymore." The The silence that followed stretched out like a heavy blanket. I watched as she processed my words, her face flickering through a range of emotions: denial, anger, and finally resignation. "You're really going to pull this on me?" she said, her voice rising defensively. "You think you know everything, don't you? I don't need to play detective to know when I'm being cheated on." "It doesn't take a genius to realize when someone is lying," I shot back. "You've been distant for months. You think I wouldn't notice?" Claire's expression hardened. "You're making a big deal out of nothing. You don't know the whole story," she spat, her tone sharp. I took a deep breath, trying to keep my emotions in check. "Then tell me, what's your excuse? Was I not good enough? Was I not there for you? Explain to me how this is my fault." For a moment, she looked like she might actually answer. But instead, she launched into a tirade about how I had neglected her, how my focus on work had made her feel unloved and unwanted. "You barely pay attention to me anymore. I felt so alone," she exclaimed, her voice rising in volume, drawing the attention of a few nearby tables. "That's not an excuse to cheat," I said, my voice firm. "You had options. You could have talked to me. You could have told me how you felt instead of running into someone else's arms. But you chose the easy way out." Claire's eyes flashed with anger, but beneath it, there was a flicker of guilt. "I didn't mean for it to happen," she said, her voice losing some of its heat. "I thought you were happier when I was out with friends. I thought I was giving you space." "That's the thing, Claire. You weren't giving me space. You were distancing yourself from me. And when I tried to reach out, you shut me down," I said, my heart racing. "You make it sound like this is all my fault, but you need to own your choices. You made a commitment to me and you broke it." She opened her mouth to respond, but the words didn't come. Instead, she looked down at the table, her fingers fidgeting with her coffee cup. I could see the facade of confidence slipping away, replaced by something that looked a lot like regret. "I just wanted to feel alive again," she whispered, almost to herself. "I thought maybe I could find that spark again, but I see now." Her voice trailed off and the silence between us grew heavy. "You thought an affair would fix your problems?" I asked softly, my anger giving way to a deep sadness. "Did you really think it wouldn't have consequences?" "I don't know," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. I felt lost." I took a moment to collect myself, the weight of her confession pressing down on me. "Claire," I said finally, "I want to understand. I want to know why it came to this. But I need to know if you even want to fix this. Do you want to work on our marriage, or are you still caught up in whatever it is you have with him?" She looked up, and for the first time, I saw vulnerability in her eyes. "I don't know," she admitted, tears glistening. "I was looking for something I thought I lost, but now I don't even know what that is anymore." Her honesty cut deep, stirring a mix of emotions inside me. I was angry, heartbroken, but also oddly relieved to hear her admit to the chaos in her mind. "You have to decide what you want, Claire," I said gently. "Because I can't keep living like this, not when I've given everything to this marriage." "I need time," she said, her voice shaky but sincere. "Time is something we may not have," I replied, my heart sinking as I realized the gravity of the situation. "You've already made your choice once. Can you promise me you won't choose him again?" As we sat there, surrounded by the noise of the coffee shop, I realized this was the beginning of a long, tough road ahead, one that would require honesty, acceptance, and perhaps even forgiveness. But first, Claire had to want to take that road with me. The weight of uncertainty loomed large, but for the first time, I felt a flicker of hope that we might find a way back to each other. After our conversation at the coffee shop, the air between Claire and me felt charged, like a storm brewing on the horizon. I could sense that real change was possible, but the question loomed large. Would she take the necessary steps to repair what had been broken? In the days that followed, Claire and I communicated more openly than we had in months. It was strange, almost surreal, to discuss our feelings so candidly. We started having deeper talks about our relationship, what was working, what wasn't, and what we both needed. Yet it also felt like we were walking on a tightrope, both of us acutely aware that one misstep could send us tumbling back into chaos. Claire suggested couples therapy as a means to facilitate our communication. At first, I hesitated. The thought of going to a therapist felt like admitting defeat. But as we explored it further, I realized it might be the only way to navigate the emotional minefield we were in. We found a local therapist, and our first session was eye-opening. The therapist encouraged us to share our feelings openly, without fear of judgment. As we spoke, I felt the weight of my resentment and anger begin to lift. I was able to articulate my feelings of betrayal and hurt, while Claire shared her feelings of isolation and despair. It felt liberating, even if it was painful. However, the process wasn't without its challenges. Claire struggled with the guilt of her actions. She often teared up during sessions, and I could see the conflict warring within her. She wanted to heal our relationship, yet the shadow of her affair loomed over us, constantly reminding us of the fractures in our foundation. One evening, after a particularly intense therapy session, Claire and I returned home feeling emotionally drained. I started cooking dinner while she sat on the couch, deep in thought. I could see her brow furrowed, the wheels in her mind turning. "Do you think we'll ever get past this?" she asked quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. I paused, knife in hand, and turned to face her. "I honestly hope so," I replied, "but it's going to take time. Trust isn't rebuilt overnight." She nodded, looking down at her hands. "I just feel so ashamed of what I did. I never wanted to hurt you, and yet here we are." I stepped away from the stove, wiping my hands on a towel. "Let be real, Claire. What you did hurt me deeply, but I'm willing to work on this if you are. We can't change the past, but we can change how we move forward." As the weeks went by, we continued attending therapy. I started to learn more about Claire's motivations, her feelings of inadequacy, and her fears about our relationship. It was hard to listen to her admit that she felt lonely in a marriage she once cherished. Yet, amidst the pain, I began to see glimpses of the woman I fell in love with, the one who was passionate, driven, and full of life. The healing process was slow and often messy. Some days I felt optimistic, while on others, the shadows of betrayal loomed large. I found myself grappling with the question, could I ever fully trust her again? One night I came home late from work to find Claire sitting at the dining table, a candle flickering between us. She had set up a mini-date, complete with our favorite takeout and a bottle of wine. I could see she was trying to reconnect, and it touched me deeply. "Hey," I said, smiling despite the heaviness that still lingered in my heart. "This looks amazing." "Thanks," she said, offering a shy smile. "I wanted to do something special for us. I know things haven't been easy, but I'm committed to making it work, to being better." Her sincerity warmed me, but there was still a part of me that couldn't shake the fear of what lay ahead. "I appreciate that," I said, taking a seat and pouring a glass of wine for each of us. "I want this to work too, but Claire, I need to know you're all in, no half measures." She reached across the table, her hand covering mine. "I'm all in. I want to earn back your trust. I want to be the wife you deserve." As we shared dinner, I started to feel a flicker of hope. Maybe, just maybe, we could navigate this storm together. Yet as much as I wanted to believe it, the memory of her betrayal still cast a long shadow over us. That night, as we settled into bed, I couldn't help but wonder about the road ahead. Would we come out stronger, or would the scars of this betrayal always linger? I held Claire close, allowing the warmth of her body to soothe me, but I also felt a weight pressing down on my chest. The journey toward healing and reconciliation was uncertain, and we had only just begun to scratch the surface of what lay ahead. The next morning, as I woke up to the sound of birds chirping outside our window, I realized that the path to rebuilding our relationship wouldn't be smooth. It would be filled with bumps and possible setbacks. But the question remained, was I ready to face those challenges, to forgive and move on? I knew I had to confront that within myself before we could truly heal. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for the conversations yet to come. We were in this together, and I was determined to see it through, no matter where that might lead us. As the weeks turned into months, Claire and I continued our therapy sessions, and I began to notice subtle but significant changes in our relationship. The communication barriers that had once stood tall between us started to crumble. We were learning to speak honestly, to listen without judgment, and perhaps most importantly, to empathize with one another's feelings. It was a slow process, but we were making progress. However, with each step forward, I began to grapple with a growing sense of uncertainty. I wanted to believe that we could emerge from this ordeal stronger than before, but a nagging fear lingered in the back of my mind. What if Claire fell back into old habits? What if the trust we were rebuilding was just an illusion, a fragile facade ready to shatter at the first sign of trouble? One Friday evening, Claire suggested we celebrate our progress with a weekend getaway. I hesitated. The idea of stepping away from our routine felt daunting, but part of me recognized that we needed to reconnect outside of our usual environment, away from the weight of our everyday lives. I agreed, and we booked a cozy cabin in the woods for a two-night retreat. When we arrived at the cabin, the beauty of our surroundings took my breath away. The crisp air, the stunning view of the forest, and the serene atmosphere felt like a fresh start. As we settled in, I could see the excitement in Claire's eyes, a spark that had been missing for so long. For the first time in a while, I felt a glimmer of hope for our future. That first night, we made a fire and sat together, wrapped in blankets, sipping hot cocoa. The warmth of the flames danced around us, casting flickering shadows on the walls of the cabin. We laughed, reminiscing about our early days together when everything felt new and exciting. It was a much-needed reminder of the love we had once shared. But as the night wore on, the deeper issues crept back into my mind. I found myself staring into the fire, letting my thoughts swirl like the flames. I knew I had to confront my lingering fears about trust, but that wasn't something I could easily articulate in a moment of levity. The next morning, while Claire was still asleep, I took a walk outside to clear my head. The tranquility of the woods enveloped me, the sounds of chirping birds and rustling leaves creating a natural symphony. I thought about how far we had come, yet I couldn't shake the feeling that we were still in a precarious place. When I returned to the cabin, Claire was awake and brewing coffee. I poured myself a cup and watched as she moved around the kitchen, her hair tousled and her eyes bright. She looked so carefree in that moment, and it struck me how much I missed that version of her. "Good morning," she said, her smile warm and inviting. "What do you want to do today?" I hesitated, searching for the right words. "Can we talk about something?" I finally said, my voice steady. "Of course," she replied, her expression shifting to one of concern. "What's on your mind?" Taking a deep breath, I steeled myself. "I've been thinking a lot about trust lately. I know we've made progress, but I can't help feeling like I'm still holding back. I'm scared to fully let my guard down." Claire's eyes softened as she listened. "I understand. I know I broke your trust, and I don't expect you to just forget that. I want to rebuild it, but I can't do that alone. I need you to meet me halfway." Her honesty touched me, yet it also brought the reality of our situation crashing back. "It's hard for me, Claire. I want to believe in us, but I'm still haunted by what you did. I guess I don't want to be blindsided again." She nodded, her expression earnest. "I don't want you to feel that way. I'm still here fighting for us. I know I have to prove myself to you, and I'm willing to do whatever it takes." We talked for hours that morning, sharing our fears, hopes, and the deep-seated issues that had plagued our marriage. I could see Claire's commitment shining through her words. She was determined to make it right. But I also realized that this conversation was just a stepping stone, a beginning in what would be a long journey. As the day unfolded, we spent time hiking through the woods, exploring the beauty of nature together. With each step, I felt the tension between us shift. Laughter gradually returned, and we began to reconnect in ways that felt genuine and authentic. It was a reminder of the bond we had forged before the storm, and it filled me with a sense of possibility. That evening, we enjoyed a candlelit dinner on the porch, the sun setting behind the trees casting a warm glow over everything. As we ate, I caught her gaze and saw a flicker of something I hadn't seen in a long time: hope. "Thank you for being open with me," she said, her voice sincere. "I know I have a long way to go, but I'm committed to doing this with you no matter how hard it gets." I nodded, my heart swelling with a mix of emotions. "I appreciate that, Claire. I want to believe in us, but it's going to take time. We just have to keep working at it together." The rest of our trip was a whirlwind of warmth and laughter, but I felt a greater weight on my heart. We were trying to rebuild, but I understood that true healing would take time, patience, and effort from both of us. As we packed up to leave the cabin, I felt a renewed sense of determination. We had made strides, and while the road ahead was still uncertain, I was ready to embrace the journey. I had learned that love was not just about the good times. It was about confronting the hard truths and working through them together. When we drove back home, I glanced over at Claire, who looked content and peaceful. I hoped that trust could be rebuilt, and that together we could find a way to emerge from this ordeal stronger and more united than ever. I didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in a long time, I felt an inkling of optimism. If we both put in the effort, maybe we could write a new chapter in our story. Returning home from our getaway, I felt a mix of hope and apprehension. The past few days had been a refreshing break from the heaviness of our reality, but I knew that real life awaited us. The problems that had driven us apart were still there, lurking beneath the surface, and I was acutely aware that the healing process wouldn't be instantaneous. In the weeks that followed, we continued our therapy sessions regularly. Each meeting peeled back layers of our relationship, revealing deeper issues that we had long ignored. We learned about the importance of vulnerability, of expressing our fears rather than suppressing them. It was messy and sometimes painful, but it was also cathartic. I felt like we were reestablishing a connection that had been buried under resentment and betrayal. One evening, as I sat on the couch scrolling through my phone, I stumbled upon an article about rebuilding trust in relationships. It struck a chord, prompting me to reflect on our journey. I realized that trust was not just about fidelity. It was also about transparency and consistent efforts to show one another that we were committed to the relationship. It required both of us to be accountable for our actions. That night, I decided to talk to Claire about my thoughts. I found her in the kitchen preparing dinner. The familiar scent of garlic and herbs filled the air, and it brought back memories of the times we used to cook together before everything fell apart. "Hey," I said, leaning against the doorframe. "Can we chat for a minute?" "Of course," she replied, turning off the stove and wiping her hands on a towel. "What's on your mind?" I took a deep breath, trying to find the right words. "I read something today about rebuilding trust, and it really got me thinking. I want us to focus on being more transparent with each other. I think it could help us move forward." Claire nodded thoughtfully. "I agree. I've been working on being more open about my feelings, and I want you to feel like you can do the same. It's important for us to create a safe space where we can express ourselves without fear of judgment." Her response filled me with gratitude. "Exactly. I want us to check in with each other regularly, to talk about any fears or insecurities that pop up. It's easy to fall back into old patterns, and I don't want that to happen again." Over the next few weeks, we established a routine of weekly check-ins. During these sessions, we'd sit down together, free from distractions, and discuss our feelings, our individual struggles, and anything that might be bothering us. It was an eye-opening experience. Sometimes, we revisited old wounds, but we also celebrated the things we were doing well. One night, as we sat on the balcony with glasses of wine, I marveled at how far we had come. "I never thought we'd get here again," I said, gazing into her eyes. "I genuinely feel like we're building something new, something stronger." Claire smiled, her expression softening. "I've never taken our relationship for granted, but this experience has opened my eyes. I see now how important it is to nurture what we have." As summer faded into fall, I noticed more changes within Claire. She was becoming more engaged in our relationship, showing initiative in planning dates and surprise outings. It felt refreshing, and I could see she was genuinely committed to making amends. One weekend, she surprised me with a picnic at the park where we had first discussed our future together. As we spread the blanket on the grass and unpacked our food, I felt a wave of nostalgia. The sun was shining, and laughter danced in the air as we reminisced about our shared history. "I remember this place," Claire said, her eyes sparkling. "We talked about travel and big dreams here." "Yeah," I chuckled. "It feels like a lifetime ago. I want to make more memories like this," she said, her voice earnest. "I want to rediscover the joy we had, the connection that brought us together in the first place." Her sincerity tugged at my heart. "Me too, Claire. I think we're on the right path." As we sat there, surrounded by the warmth of the sun and the laughter of families nearby, I realized that while the scars of betrayal would always be a part of our story, They didn't have to define us. We had a choice to embrace the journey ahead, to heal together, and to rekindle the love that had brought us to this moment. And so, as I held Claire's hand across the picnic blanket, I felt a flicker of optimism for our future. We were not just survivors of betrayal. We were two people determined to grow, learn, and love each other more deeply than ever before. In the end, I learned that relationships require constant effort, but when two people are committed to facing their challenges together, the rewards can be profound. It wasn't just about forgiving each other. It was about rebuilding a foundation that could withstand the storms of life. And with each passing day, I felt more and more confident that we were doing just that.